I still remember standing by the office coffee machine adding cream to my morning cup when Chad walked into the break room. The new COO didn't bother with a greeting or even a nod, just looked at me like I was some old equipment he'd already decided to scrap. "Marcus, I need to see you in my office. Now." Wasn't a request. I'm Marcus Sullivan, 52 years old, and I'd been with Sullivan Industries for 15 years. Built our entire logistics operation from scratch. Negotiated deals that kept this place running when other companies went under. But apparently, none of that mattered to Chad Sullivan, the founder's son, who'd just graduated from Stanford with his shiny MBA. I followed him down the hall, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. He didn't even sit down when we got to his office. "You're fired," he said, voice flat as roadkill. "We're streamlining operations. Don't need people stuck in the past dragging us down." I blinked. Had to be some kind of joke. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." He was already shuffling through papers like he was ordering lunch. "Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. I stood there, stomach dropping. 15 years. I wanted to grab him by his $200 tie and explain exactly what I'd done for this company. Instead, I smiled. Calm, polite, professional. "Understood. Have a good day, Chad." Walked out with my head high, but inside I was shaking. My team looked up as I passed their desks. They could sense something was wrong. A few started to stand, ready to ask questions, but I gave them a quick shake of my head. No point making this harder than it had to be. Packed my desk in silence. 15 years of my life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. As I drove home, memories hit me hard. All those late nights, weekends, holidays, I'd worked while my own family barely saw me. Calls I took while coaching my son's Little League games. I'd given this company everything, and now I was tossed out like yesterday's newspaper. But I wasn't angry yet. I was curious. Why now? Why so sudden? Something didn't add up. Look, the timing was bizarre. We were 10 days away from finalizing the biggest contract in company history, a $15 million deal with Apex Corporation that I'd spent 8 months putting together. I knew their procurement team better than I knew my own neighbors. I'd been scheduled to fly to Phoenix the following Tuesday for the final signature meeting. Had Chad even looked at the paperwork? Did he know about the Hartwell clause? See, 5 years ago we had a disaster with Hartwell Industries. Their negotiator quit mid-deal, replacement couldn't close, and we lost $8 million. After that mess, Mr. Sullivan insisted on authorization clauses. 1 person per major deal, legally binding. Can't just swap people in and out. Chad wouldn't know about that. Kid probably never read a contract in his life. Next morning, 9 a.m. sharp, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Marcus, it's Mr. Sullivan." My blood went cold. The founder himself, the man who'd hired me 15 years ago after I got out of the Navy. "I just walked into the office," he said, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Why'd you clean out your desk and leave?" I paused. "Your son fired me yesterday." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "He what?" Said the company was streamlining, that I was stuck in the past. Long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "Marcus, did he mention the Apex deal?" My stomach dropped further. "What about it?" "You're supposed to be on a plane to Phoenix next Tuesday. The final signing's Wednesday." "Yes, sir, that's what we scheduled." Jesus Christ. I heard papers rustling, then what sounded like a fist hitting a desk. "Marcus, your contract has that clause I insisted on after the Hartwell disaster. You're not just the account manager on Apex, you're the only authorized negotiator, legally, ethically, practically. They won't sign with anyone else." The room started spinning. He didn't know? Apparently not. The kid just cost us $15 million because he can't be bothered to read a contract before firing people. Mr. Sullivan hung up without another word. I sat in my kitchen, coffee getting cold, staring at nothing. Chad had pulled the trigger without even knowing what he was shooting at, and now the gun was pointed straight back at him. I leaned back in my chair and let out a laugh. Not a happy one. Bitter. Sharp. After 15 years of putting this company first, watching younger guys get promoted while I did the real work, this was how it ended. Some spoiled kid with a business degree thinking he could run logistics like a college case study. Didn't have to wait long to see the fallout. 10:15 a.m. Chad called. I let it go to voicemail. 10:17 a.m. Chad called again. Voicemail. 10:20 a.m. Reception called. Voicemail. 10:25 a.m. Legal department. Voicemail. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I sat there watching it buzz, not answering a single call. Finally, checked Chad's voicemail around noon. Marcus, hi, it's Chad. Listen, there might have been a misunderstanding yesterday. I may have acted too quickly. We need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. Not, I'm sorry, not I made a mistake. Urgent, like this was somehow my emergency to solve. 12:30 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Rachel, my old colleague from accounting. Sweet kid, just 24, actually respected experience instead of dismissing it. Marcus, she whispered, you won't believe what's happening here. Try me. Chad just got torn apart by his father, in front of everyone. Mr. Sullivan walked into the conference room with the Apex contract and slammed it on the table. I raised an eyebrow. And? Asked one simple question. Did you read this before firing Marcus? Chad tried to talk about modernizing and efficiency, but Mr. Sullivan wasn't having it. Flipped straight to the authorization clause. She paused and I could hear office chatter in the background. Marcus, Chad went white as a sheet. Like, ghost white. He realized he's the reason Apex is about to walk away. What did Mr. Sullivan say? Told him if this deal falls through, his position here becomes very negotiable. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, but close. Thanks for the heads up, Rachel. Marcus, whatever you're planning, you've got leverage now. Use it. 1:15 p.m., Mr. Sullivan called directly. Marcus, I owe you a sincere apology. This never should have happened. Please come in. Not just for Apex, but so we can talk privately about your future here. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to let them crash and burn. Let Chad explain to the board how he'd torpedoed a $15 million deal on day 3 of his new job. But I'm not built that way. Never have been. I'll consider coming back to close the Apex deal. But I want to speak with you first. Privately. Absolutely. Can you be here in an hour? I showered, put on my best suit, and drove back to the office. But this time I didn't park in the employee lot. Walked straight through the main lobby like I owned the place. The receptionist nearly jumped out of her chair. Mr. Sullivan, Marcus is here to see you. He was waiting at his office door when I arrived. Didn't smile, didn't try to shake my hand, just stepped aside and let me walk in first. I screwed up, he said as soon as the door closed. Gave Chad too much authority too fast. Thought it'd teach him responsibility. I stayed quiet. What he did to you was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, it nearly destroyed a deal we've worked 8 months to build. He sat behind his desk, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. I want to offer you your job back. Full authority over the Apex contract. Whatever conditions you need. I looked him in the eye. It's not just about Apex. This is about leadership. About treating people with respect. You're right. I'll come back and close the deal. But I want everything in writing. Clear authority, no interference from Chad. And this can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone else. Done. One more thing. I want a role in management development. Some of these young executives need to learn the difference between authority and leadership. He nodded slowly. I think that can be arranged. When I walked out of his office, Chad was standing at the end of the hall, arms crossed, pretending to be in deep conversation with someone from marketing. But his eyes were locked on me. I walked straight past him without a word. Listen, the next week was interesting. Word had gotten around about what happened. People were treating me different. Not like the guy who got fired, but like the guy who came back on his own terms. Felt good, I won't lie. But I knew Chad wasn't done. Guys like him don't just disappear when they lose. They retreat and regroup. The Apex meeting got rescheduled for the following Tuesday. Gave us time to prep properly, which was smart. Harrison Webb, their CEO, was old school like me, Navy veteran who'd built his company from nothing. He valued relationships over flashy presentations. I spent the weekend reviewing every detail. Contract terms, delivery schedules, payment structures. Everything had to be perfect. This wasn't just about closing a deal anymore, it was about proving I was worth the fight. Tuesday morning I got to the office early, 7 a.m., place was empty except for security. I liked it that way. Quiet, focused, no distractions. Around 8:30, Rachel knocked on my door. Marcus? The Apex team just landed. They'll be here in an hour. Thanks. How's Chad doing? She made a face, pacing around like a caged animal. Mr. Sullivan told him to stay clear of the meeting. Good. At 9:30 sharp, Harrison Webb walked into our conference room with his team. I greeted him in Arabic, remembered from our first meeting that he'd done business in the Middle East for years. His face lit up. You remembered, he said, smiling. Respect goes a long way in this business. Always has. The meeting went perfectly. 2 hours later, we shook hands on the biggest deal in company history. Webb pulled me aside afterward, heard there was some confusion about who was handling this contract, nothing we couldn't sort out. He smiled. Good. Wouldn't have signed with anyone else anyway. You earned our trust. After they left, Mr. Sullivan found me in the conference room. You saved us, he said. And I owe you more than an apology. You owe this company better leadership development. He didn't argue. That evening, driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just relief, but genuine satisfaction. I'd proven my worth without losing my dignity. Handled a crisis with professionalism instead of emotion. But I knew this wasn't over. Guys like Chad don't just disappear. They retreat and then they retaliate. Sure enough, by the following week, small things started happening. Expense reports getting delayed. Meeting invitations mysteriously not reaching me. Files I'd submitted for approval coming back unsigned with no explanation. Then someone accessed my email account from a shared computer and sent incorrect specifications to one of our overseas partners. Luckily, it was a company I had a solid relationship with. They called me directly to clarify. But damage was already done in their minds. I'd seen this playbook before. Back in the Navy, we had officers who couldn't handle direct confrontation, so they'd use administrative warfare instead. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I started documenting everything. Every delayed approval, every mysterious system glitch, every meeting I wasn't invited to. Kept a notebook with dates, times, witnesses. Old habits from military service. Paper trails save careers. Then I overheard something that confirmed my suspicions. Walking past the break room, I heard Chad's voice through the thin walls. He's been erratic since he came back. Aggressive, unstable. I don't think he can handle high-pressure situations anymore. I stopped cold. Erratic? I was the guy who just saved his ass on the biggest deal of the year. Maybe we should start thinking about succession planning for the logistics department. We can't run a company on sentiment. Another voice, one of the newer executives, responded. But the Apex deal, he pulled that off under serious pressure. Chad scoffed. Lucky break. Can't build a future on luck. I walked away before I heard the rest. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was pissed. That night I stayed late. Office was quiet, just security making rounds. I sat in the conference room where we'd signed the Apex deal, looking out at the city lights, wondering how many more battles I'd have to fight just to do my job. Then footsteps in the hallway. Mr. Sullivan appeared at the door. Still here? Catching up on some paperwork? He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. I've been watching things this week, noticed some irregularities. I looked up. Such as files getting lost, approvals delayed, email problems. He sat across from me. I'm not blind, Marcus. I know what Chad's trying to do. Why haven't you stopped him? I asked. Long pause. Because I needed to see how far he'd go. Document everything. You're building a case. I'm protecting this company. And that includes protecting the people who actually make it run. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a promotion letter. Senior VP of Operations. Direct report to him, not Chad. Significant raise, equity stake, full authority over logistics and supply chain. There's more, he said. I want you to head up our management development program. Train the next generation properly. I closed the folder. And Chad will be working under your supervision until he learns how to actually manage people instead of just managing problems. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my desk. Now I was being offered the chance to train the kid who'd fired me. When do I start? Monday. But first, we need to deal with this sabotage situation. I've called in an internal audit team. Thursday morning, I got called into the audit committee's temporary office. They'd set up in an old storage room, files stacked on tables, monitors glowing with data, whiteboard covered with timelines and digital breadcrumbs. David Martinez, the lead internal auditor, greeted me. Marcus, thanks for coming in. We'd like to ask you some questions about recent irregularities. I nodded and took a seat. He pulled up a file on the screen. First, this email that appeared to be from your account. We've confirmed it was sent from a shared workstation near the break room. The credentials were manually entered. So someone used my login? He shook his head. Someone had your credentials. Copied them, most likely. This wasn't phishing, it was internal. I folded my arms. I reported that incident the day it happened. Yes, and we're glad you did. We found several others like it. Emails rewritten, spreadsheets altered, sign-offs removed, always traced to shared machines, always under your name. The weight in my chest grew heavier. This was coordinated. David hesitated. Yes, and we've narrowed down the list of people who had access. We've also noticed unusual patterns linked to Chad's executive assistant's login. I sat still as he continued carefully. We're not accusing anyone yet, but there's a clear pattern. Sabotage intended to discredit you and possibly others. So what happens now? That's where it gets complicated. Mr. Sullivan asked us to present our findings directly to him. He's made it clear he wants the truth, all of it, no filters. I nodded slowly. Then I'll be there. David raised his eyebrows. You're not required to attend. I will be there. If this is going to surface, I want to look everyone in the eye. He didn't argue. Friday morning, I arrived early to the executive boardroom. Mr. Sullivan was already there, staring out the window like a man waiting for the final card to fall. David and 2 other auditors came in next. Then Chad arrived, 10 minutes late, looking smug, phone in hand. Not a trace of concern on his face until he saw me. He paused at the door. She's not on the audit committee. Mr. Sullivan didn't turn. He's here at my request. Chad shifted his weight uncomfortably. This is supposed to be internal, confidential. Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate emails, I said, voice calm but sharp. Chad scoffed. That's ridiculous. David spoke up. We've traced multiple login attempts tied to your assistant's account, all connected to irregularities targeting Marcus's work. There's a clear timeline. Chad's face began to shift, his practiced smugness cracking. You're reaching. He's just bitter about being let go. I looked him in the eye. You didn't let me go, Chad. You sabotaged me. And you almost tanked the biggest deal this company has landed in 5 years. Mr. Sullivan finally turned. I gave you a chance. I gave you more than one. And you've done nothing but tear down the people trying to build something real here. Chad's bravado faltered. This isn't what you think. No, Mr. Sullivan cut in. It's worse. Heavy silence filled the room. Then Mr. Sullivan stood. The board will be reviewing this report. Until then, you're suspended, effective immediately. Chad opened his mouth to protest, but the words never came. He looked at me one last time, not with rage, but with disbelief, like he'd finally realized that none of his usual tricks were going to save him now. He walked out in silence. I stayed behind. Mr. Sullivan exhaled, his shoulders sagging. I failed him as a leader, maybe as a father. You can't lead someone who refuses to grow, I said quietly. But you can still lead the company. You've got that choice. He looked at me, then nodded. For the first time since this all began, I felt the weight start to lift. 2 weeks later, the board made their decision. Chad's suspension became a termination. The official announcement cited breaches of ethical conduct and internal misconduct. No lawsuits, no press releases, just a quiet exit through the back door of corporate history. But word spread anyway. In our industry, news travels fast. I thought I'd feel triumphant when I heard. Instead, I felt calm. Not victorious, just steady. Like I'd weathered the storm and could finally breathe again. The following Monday, I started my new role. Corner office, view of the city, nameplate that finally meant something. But the real work was just beginning. My first task was rebuilding the management program. I brought in younger employees, taught them to value experience alongside innovation. Created mentorship pairs between seasoned workers and recent graduates. We reopened lines of communication. Reinstated people who'd been pushed out unfairly. Set up an anonymous reporting system so no one else would have to fear retaliation for speaking up. I even made time for the younger staff who were just starting out. Some had witnessed what I went through and quietly asked how I stayed strong. Look, I told them, You don't always get to pick the battles, but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them. 3 months later, we landed another major contract, this time with Chad's replacement, Jennifer Walsh, a 35-year-old operations expert with real experience, as lead negotiator and me as advisor. She gave me full credit during the announcement, something the old Chad never would have done. Mr. Sullivan pulled me aside afterward. You could have destroyed him when he fired you. Instead, you made the company better. That's real leadership. I thought about that conversation later, sitting in my new office. The kid who'd fired me was gone, but the real victory wasn't getting my job back or even the promotion. It was proving that experience matters, that loyalty should be rewarded, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply being better than the person who wronged you. 6 months into my new role, things had changed dramatically. The management program was working. We'd paired every new hire with a mentor, someone with real experience who could teach them how business actually works, not just how it looks on paper. Jennifer Walsh was a perfect example. She'd come in as Chad's replacement with impressive credentials, but more importantly, she had the sense to listen. During our first contract negotiation together, she deferred to my experience with the client relationships. Marcus knows these people, she told the team. I may have the title, but he's got the trust. That's leadership, real leadership. We closed that deal for $12 million, not as big as Apex, but solid money. And this time, there was no drama, no last-minute fires to put out, just good preparation and teamwork. Word was getting around the industry too. We started attracting talent from competitors, experienced people who'd been pushed aside at their own companies for younger, cheaper replacements. They wanted to work somewhere that valued what they brought to the table. One afternoon, I got a call that surprised me. It was Harrison Webb from Apex. Marcus, I've got a proposition for you. We're expanding our West Coast operations. Looking for a logistics partner. I'm listening. $25 million contract. 3 years. But here's the thing. I want you personally managing it, not your company, you. I smiled. Harrison, I am the company now. Senior VP of Operations. Even better. When can we meet? That's how it works in this business. Relationships matter. Trust matters. You can't build either with PowerPoint presentations or MBA theories. Takes time, consistency, follow through. The funny thing is, I started hearing stories about Chad. He'd landed at a smaller firm outside Phoenix, but his reputation had followed him. Turns out firing your most experienced people and sabotaging colleagues isn't a great career move. Who knew? Some folks said Mr. Sullivan had pulled strings to keep Chad's name out of the industry gossip. Maybe that was a father's last act of love. I didn't ask, didn't need to know. What mattered was what we were building here. Rachel got promoted to senior financial analyst. She'd earned it, but I made sure she knew the promotion came with responsibility. Help the next group of new hires navigate the corporate maze. Pass it forward. You remember what it was like being dismissed because you were young? I told her. Don't let us do that to others because they're experienced. She got it. We instituted monthly wisdom sessions, informal meetings where senior staff shared real-world lessons with junior employees. Not theoretical case studies, but actual war stories. What worked, what didn't, what they'd do differently. The young folks ate it up. Turns out they wanted to learn from people who'd been there, done that. They just needed someone to take the time to teach them properly. Mr. Sullivan started attending these sessions too, listening more than talking, which was smart. At 58, he was learning that being the founder didn't mean he had all the answers. One evening, after a particularly good session about crisis management, he pulled me aside. You know what I realized? He said. I spent so much time trying to prepare Chad to take over someday that I forgot to prepare him to actually lead people. Leadership can't be inherited, I replied. Has to be earned. Wish I'd figured that out sooner. You figured it out when it mattered. A year after the whole mess started, I was walking through the office and past that same coffee machine where it all began. Same spot where Chad had delivered his little termination speech with all the warmth of a parking ticket. I poured myself a cup. Black coffee, no cream anymore. Tastes change, I guess. Jennifer walked by, coffee in hand. Morning, Marcus. Ready for the Apex expansion meeting? Born ready. She laughed. You know, when I took this job, people warned me about working with you, said you were difficult, set in your ways. And they were half right. You are set in your ways, but your ways work. That afternoon, we signed the Apex expansion deal, $25 million over 3 years with options for additional territories. Harrison Webb insisted on the same authorization clause I'd had before, Marcus Sullivan as sole negotiator. Some things don't need fixing, he said with a handshake. Later that night, driving home past the city lights, I thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, I was a guy counting down years to retirement, hoping not to get noticed by the wrong people. Now I was training the next generation, closing bigger deals than ever, and actually enjoying going to work again. The real lesson wasn't about corporate politics or workplace revenge. It was simpler than that. Never let anyone convince you that your experience doesn't matter. Age isn't a liability in business. It's an asset if you know how to use it. Chad learned that the hard way. Kid had all the credentials in the world, but he forgot that business is about people, not spreadsheets. You can't automate relationships, can't download trust, can't fast-track respect. I keep a photo on my desk now. The signing ceremony for that second Apex deal. Me, Jennifer, Harrison Webb, all smiling. Not because we're friends, but because we're professionals who figured out how to respect each other. That's the thing about corporate warfare. You can win by destroying your enemies, or you can win by making them irrelevant. I chose the harder path, but it's the one I can live with. And every morning when I walk past that coffee machine where this all started, I remember the lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they've been around longer than you. We didn't get here by accident. Experience matters. Trust matters. And sometimes, the old dog really does know a few tricks worth learning.